Hey guys, welcome back to Razor RC, and I finished building my RC10 B64D and just wanted to shoot a quick video about the build and how it went, and maybe a couple of little trouble spots I ran into that might help you guys out. So here it is, the B64D, all completed, ready to run. I haven't actually run it yet, but we'll probably today or tomorrow. Looking forward to getting this thing out on track. So let me kind of pop off the body and go through what I've got going on in my particular build, electronics wise and stuff. So here it is. I built this as, basically a mod four-wheel drive buggy, and there it is, all wired up, ready to go. So I've got a Savax 1258TG Black Edition servo. Got my Sanwa 481 receiver, Hobbywing V3.1 stock spec ESC, and then I got this cheap little Trackstar 8.5 turn motor I had lying around. It's been kind of sitting around in my parts box for a couple years, and I thought it was actually a 7.5 turn, but when I grabbed it out of the box, I was like, oh, that's an 8.5. Okay, I'll just throw that in. So that's what I've got, sort of my own electronics wise, and pretty much built it all kit set up. I changed the rear springs to white springs. I think I'm going to just try that out. But everything else is pretty much kit. I got 10K fluid, 100K, and I did try 7K for now, and we'll see how that goes. Kit setup's actually 10K, but usually I run a little bit softer in the rear. So that's the actual buggy. It went together pretty well, I'd say. No major issues. I wasn't missing any parts, or nothing was manufactured, I guess you would say. For the most part, everything went together pretty well. It's a nice, elegant design. Pretty straightforward. Goes together how you would expect. Not a ton of weird complexity or parts, like my 22.4 is very unusual vehicle, to say the least. But this one, it goes the way you would think. The front end pretty much assembles like the rear end. Even the hinge pins have the same inserts. The diffs, look pretty much the same. So a very straightforward build, I'd say. It was a fun build. I hadn't built this type of vehicle before. I didn't own an X-Ray or even actually another shaft-driven four-wheel drive buggy, but this one was pretty fun, and it only took a few days. I built I think the main rolling chassis on Friday and Saturday, put together shocks on like Sunday, and then painted the body and did the electronics on Monday, basically. So it's all built now, and I kind of walked through some of the things I saw during the build. The instruction manuals was pretty good, pretty typical AE style. I find it pretty easy to read and pretty easy to work through. Bags wise, they do have a lot of bags. There are a ton of bags in this thing. And so each step's kind of broken down into multiple bags, like, 1.1, 1.2. One thing I did notice is sometimes there'd be some phantom bags, like I think step 2, it says there's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Well, there's no bag 2.3. Everything's in the first two. So I guess that was kind of a parts organization change they made during the manufacturing that differed from the actual manual. One of the common things is that the diffs actually, they're pretty straightforward build of the diffs. I thought the seal for the I guess ring gear you'd call it, was a little thin. It's just kind of a piece of paper. And then one thing that a lot of people have found online, Cody Newmandahl has actually talked about this as well, is that the diff shims are a little bit off. It says to put 5 here on the right side and then 3 here on the left side. That's pretty much off. Most people are going like about 7 on the right and 1 or 0 on the left. So I ended up with actually 7 and 0 for pretty much front and rear diffs. Once you put this whole thing together, both halves of the diff case on, it actually starts binding up a bit, and I had some kind of tight spots. It might have just broken in, but for a really smooth moving diff, for me at least, it was 7 and 0. The diff cases are also very tight. You definitely want to use some black grease. Pretty much every screw that goes through it. It says only a couple spots to use black grease, but I was using black grease pretty much for everything. And another thing to watch out for is some of these screws seem maybe a little bit long, maybe a half mil long or something. You know, I think like on the front here, basically one of these screws or a couple of these screws are just a little bit longer. Maybe they're exactly the same length as the hole. So you know, check the depths of all the holes before you stick the screw in. I think I went a couple millimeters shorter on some of these screws. So I guess apparently people have been actually breaking this diff bulkhead. Either from crashing or, you know, maybe there's just a little bit of stress put on these screws. I'm not really sure, but that's really kind of one thing I would look out for. Also on the front here, actually my caster blocks, or actually my spindles here were a little bit tight. You know, there was a little bit binding here on these aluminum parts. Nothing too bad. You know, I'd say for the most part everything kind of fit together pretty well. That was maybe the only one spot I found was kind of tight. But ball cups, you know, all the other plastic parts and metal parts all actually fit together pretty well without much binding. Especially the arms are very free on my particular buggy. Another thing I noticed is actually this hinge pin here. The hole that was drilled for that through this caster block actually was kind of impeding on the kingpin screw that goes through here. So kind of those two holes are very close to each other, so the hinge pin was fine, but once you put in this kingpin screw, it kind of would basically rub against the hinge pin and kind of lock in place, a little bit like the set screw does on the B6. So it's still moving okay. You know, it's not hurting the build at all, but yeah, I guess apparently actually some guys had to re-drill the hinge pin hole, so it wasn't quite machined right. So one of mine was like that. The other one was fine. I didn't actually have to modify anything, but it was like just a little bit too close, probably, you know, 1/10 of a millimeter too close. So that was the only really like manufacturing issue I guess I found. Everything else looked pretty good. The carbon fiber shock towers are nice. You know, all the aluminum parts seemed okay. The shocks are typical AE, which means they're not particularly smooth. The molded pistons, you know, probably are not quite as round as machine pistons, so they're not the smoothest. You may want to look into machine pistons. I'm running kit pistons for now. I haven't run kit pistons in a while. My B6 I'm using machine, but I figured I'd try that and see how it works on this buggy. Then going back to the manual, I'd say there's, you know, a step I would probably skip out on. You know, once you kind of go through steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that basically builds the entire front end here. And then step 6 is to do the servo mount, and then, you know, some of these middle braces and stuff like that. I'd hold off on that till the end, till after you do the electronics, just because it'll go together a little nicer with all the wiring and stuff. Just go on to the rear end, which is basically bag 7 and on. Same thing here on the rear diffs. They recommend 5 and 3. I also ran 7.0 again on the rear. That seemed to work a little better. I noticed there's no rear bumper, which I thought was a little odd. You just got that metal hinge pin brace sticking out there out in the open, so I don't know. Seemed like maybe a little prone to damage. The bumpers on this thing are pretty minimal. The front one's just got this single screw holding it in place, and you know, it can kind of wiggle around a little bit. You know, not much here on the bottom either. So I guess they expect you not to run into stuff. I don't know. I did notice that the shock tower is also very beefy. They look a little thicker than the B6 shock towers that people were having problems with. I never broke a B6 shock tower, but it's nice to see these kind of upgraded. Yeah, other than that, I think the build went together quite nicely. You know, there's got some nice features here with the sliding motor mount. You know, these dog bones here in the center. You know, maybe I'm just kind of dense, but I couldn't figure out how to get them actually into these out drives. The out drives have like this, I don't know if you can see it here, but basically like, Here, come around this way. Basically like this outdrive with like a C-clip or basically a hooked fastener, a hooked retainer that goes around it, and one side's got this little hook that you kind of have to like get the outdrive in underneath and then push it down. So I'd ask guys on the internet how to do that because I couldn't figure out how to get that in there. You know, maybe I'm just a little clueless. And on the front, there's only kind of one angle which you can do it, which is kind of from this angle. So when you're trying to get that on the dog bone on there, just kind of come in and get that under the loop right there. But yeah, other than that, you know, the build was nice. It's fun, you know, fairly straightforward, you know, very clean design, and I'm looking forward to driving this car. So yeah, that was pretty much it for the build. Hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel as always. Appreciate that, actually helps me out. And look for, you know, maybe an impressions video later. Thanks. Take care, guys.